All right, this will be a quick one. I've got one game that I want to run through because it showcases the changes from the last video to the current one. Quite a few of them actually come up. Um, and I'm still dealing with this horrendous cough, so I need the video to be fairly short this time so I can try to get through it. If you hear me pause it, the sound, that's why I'm pausing it. So first of all, what are the changes that have happened? I'm going to bring, first of all, none of the lands have changed. I'm going to pause for just a second so I can cough. Okay, anyhow, as you can see, there have been a number of actual changes here. So recoil and electrolyzer are gone. They're value plays that are nice with Kess, but I took both of them out and actually replaced with Phyrexian Arena, which is a long time value play that has way more overall. It's going to provide way more value than either of the other two cards, even flashback. And I think Arena is sometimes just a card that one BB win the game, right? So if you can lead off with some disruption and get an Arena out, a lot of times if you're playing against another blue deck, for example, like you've just won the game. You just have to hold the line at that point, and you're going to bury him in cards. So a card like that in a deck that supports it, which this one does, is a card that I want in my deck. So it just made its way in. The other card that I took out, which is maybe a little more controversial and kind of a disappointment for me, but I don't know. It wasn't doing great things for me overall, was As Foretold. So I took As Foretold out. I love the card, but the problem is I was having is a couple of things. First of all, I thought As Foretold would allow me to play cards from my graveyard. When I used Kess's ability to play a card from the graveyard, I thought that I could pay the cost using As Foretold, similarly to what you can do if you had a Yawgmoth's Will or a Snapcaster running. As it turns out, the interface asked me, do I want to play the card with Kess or As Foretold? Um, it seems so. I can't figure out how to make it work, and it was getting very frustrating. So I don't know if that's just my misunderstanding on how that's supposed to work or what. But because it was frustrating, I took it out. Now, you don't get the amazing As Foretold Ancestral Visions um, turns that you would occasionally get before, but you can essentially say As Foretold is Phyrexian Arena, and the other two 3 drops that I mentioned have actually become 2 drops or less, so we actually lowered the curve. So As Foretold will be a little less useful since the curve is lower if it were still in the deck. And ultimately, unlike in Brea where you generate a lot of mana rocks early and then you can cast As Foretold and have a defense up while you do it, and then you can go ahead and allow the gradual massive value that it provides in terms of mana to win the game for you slowly as you would tutor your way into crafting the perfect hand, and just feed off of As Foretold mana, getting stronger and stronger as you went. This deck just doesn't play like that. So, I mean, I would love to have an As Foretold out every game. It's one of the greatest mana producers in the game once you get it running. But I imagine in constructed where you could actually play 4 Ancestral Vision, that would be totally like insane, and I would love to put together a deck like that, and maybe I should sometime. But meanwhile, for this, Kess is just it plays out a little differently, and I haven't missed it honestly. I just haven't missed the card um, at all. So take it as you will. But that card's gone. Arena's in, and Recoil and the other card, Electrolyze value plays. Those two are gone. Instead, I have Dreadborn Terminate and Baleful Strix. So Baleful Strix is replaced a third card. Um, and I have a fourth card in here that's new and a fifth. So I have also got Tainted Pact and I've got Fatal Push. So Fatal Push is so the problem that Brian and I were noticing, particularly I think something I was talking to him about was just that there are certain commanders that you have to kill them on sight or the game's over. So if your opponent plays like first turn Elf, so let's say they're going first, they go first turn Mana Dork, you go land, they go land, Ys on the Wandering Bard. If you don't have a way to kill that thing immediately, you probably can go ahead and just scoop up your cards and move on to the next game. You've lost the game. Similarly, If somebody gets out an early Tymna and they've already got a creature to attack with, which, if they're playing Tymna Thrasios, generally they will. If you don't kill or counter that Tymna immediately, go ahead and scoop up your cards. You've probably lost. So with that in mind, I went ahead and added more ways to either take out the threats or take out the cards that make them into threats. Strix doesn't necessarily help with the Yisan problem. It does help with Tymna, potentially as a blocker, but it's just a great value card that replaces Electrolyze, no problem. And Dreadboard and Terminate, of course, do help, as does Fatal Push. The key was, we got to get that curve lower to get under the 3-drops. So if the threat is a 3-drop, your solutions need to be 2 or less. And the reason is if you go second, they can hit 3 mana while you have 2. So you need 2 mana answers to 3 mana threats. And that 3 seems to be where a lot of the cards live. But it's not the only place, because there's also cards like Jace is still in the format as a commander. It's super gross. And that's a 2-drop, which means you need 1 mana answers. Or you need a 2 mana answer, and you better hope that you went first. And excuse me. So that's where we're at. Unfortunately, this format's super degenerate because there's these commanders that cost 2 and 3 mana and have game warping effects on the game. But that's where we're at with the 1v1 format. So the only thing you can do is you've got to find out the price point on the threats that warp the board like that, and your solutions have got to be at least 1 mana less wherever possible. Now, I actually have more cards. If it turns out that right now I'm banking on Jace not being as much of a problem necessarily as these others. Cards like Phyrexian Arena could potentially help in that match. The LD can help. The discard can help. There's a lot of things that can help in this deck. But if it turns out that's not the case, then I would add Chain Lightning to the deck. If that's not enough, we just keep upping our 1 mana solutions until we've got enough. So we'd add possibly Innocent Blood would be a card for consideration. Or at that point, maybe we would just go ahead and add Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast and do it that way. So anyway, having said all that, yeah, that's where we're at with the deck. Cheap answers is the name of the game in this format. Tainted Pact here was suggested to me by the Meek, and I can't remember if he's featured on my channel or not, but if you want to look him up, he's a fine player. I love playing against him. He's a cool guy, and there's a few games out there where he and I have faced each other, as well as he's got quite a few games where he's faced other players, and so he's an interesting player. The Meek666, I think, is his name, his screen name, for whatever reason. But he suggested Tainted Pact, and right away it resonated with me. Tainted Pact was really bad in Brea because Brea had a lot of silver bullets because of the fact that the deck was a tutor deck. So it was designed, you didn't want to Tainted Pact through your one and only copy of Winter Orb, for example, or your only, Vedalken Shackles, or your one and only board sweeper, which was Toxic Deluge, right? You wanted to go find these cards, but you might have found yourself in a situation where you needed the board sweeper and you had to Tainted Pact through a Winter Orb to get to it, because if you didn't, then you lost, making Tainted Pact really, really bad because, your long-term plan is gone now, even though you have a short-term solution. Well, this deck, on the other hand, is not. So that's what happens in a silver bullet deck. You need the specific tutor cards that, not like Tainted Pact. You need go get this card and put it on top of my library or put it in my hand. The best thing you could do, similar to Pact in a deck like that, would have been maybe Limdul's Vault. Having said that, in here, Tainted Pact is great because all the cards in here, well, effectively, I would say the vast majority of the cards in here are basically just redundancies on effects that you get from other cards. I mean, you do have like Dak Faden that can steal an artifact and nothing else can do that, but that's just a cheap artifact control card. The ready will do it. Kolaghan's Command will do it, Abrade will do it, Shattering Spree will do it, Vandal Blast will do it, Fiery Confluence will do it for a little more mana. So, and as you notice, like 3 of those are mass removal. So, Pillage will kill artifacts and so forth. Excuse me. So the point is, in this deck, you can safely tainted pack through pretty much anything. And I mean, even if you get rid of your Crucible, I mean, Crucible's a nice card to have and everything, but at the end of the day, it's totally not, like, the deck isn't built around it. And as a matter of fact, it's really great with Wasteland, of course, and it's good with the fetches, but it's nowhere near as good as it was in Brea, because you just don't have as many dual lands. Brea having an extra color meant it had access to more dual lands, and because it played land tax, it also had basics. So Brea was going to be able to use Crucible Worlds to fetch a land using a sack land. You could fetch out something like 10 lands, I think it was. In this deck, you can get 6 tops. So significantly less, and that's if you didn't draw any of or fetch any of those lands previously. Usually, you're looking at Crucible Recursion on, you might get 2 or 3 lands out of your deck before you run out. So much, much, much weaker in here, but still good enough to play. So you can pack through that. And other than that, Liliana, Arena, all this stuff is just different ways to do the same thing. So Pact is insane. You get these turns where you go second turn Pact, your opponent, like, you go first, so it's land, do nothing maybe, they do nothing, you play land and they do nothing, you play land, do nothing, and they do nothing. So it's the second turn, it's the end of their second turn, nothing's happened yet, you Pact and you go get LD, for example, and then you untap and kill a land immediately, and now you've got 3 lands to their 1. They're going to, at the start of their turn, and on the very next turn you get to play Kess, and on the turn after that, you get to play a land and cast Pact and go get another LD spell. Well, actually, most likely you would, if you played Kess, you would untap and LD them again. But pretty soon, you hit that 5th mana, and then you get to Pact right into another LD spell, which you hit them with, and then you untap and hit them with again. And so basically, because of the way that the Pact works, this plus Kess ends up representing 4 land destruction spells, and if you get it on turn 2, that means you get your 3 mana land destruction spell right on time. So it gives you the perfect curve of land destruction, and it's just a great card. And I think that's all that can be said about the changes. And so I'm going to run through this game real quick. I'm running out of cough drop, so I got to get through this game before it's too late. I think it was just this. Oh no, that was just a game I played after the fact. It was one of these. Oh yeah, Fukijama. I'll go ahead and play that one, and I'll do the last one too, I guess, depending on how long this all takes. Okay, so let's see if we can get started here. So I mean, I will keep a 1-land hand if I've already mulliganed and I'm going second, and the 1-land hand is really spectacular. I'm assuming that against a 3-color deck, that the Dwarven Miner, even though he is playing green and probably has some basic fetching, generally though, the Dwarven Miner is going to be pretty good against a 3-color deck. So I would like to keep this, and the Jace could, between Jace and miscalculation, I have a lot to do. And this is one of the nice things about the deck, of course, is that the curve is so incredibly low. The other nice thing, though, is that you can usually mulligan, and you'll find a hand that's very similar to the previous one, hopefully with more mana in it. So I mulligan into this. This is, I guess, not really similar to the previous one, now that I think about it, but it does have the mana, and give it some time, and because of the redundancies in the deck, I'm going to tuck that Shivan Reef. We'll end up with the exact same play out. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play, and we'll see what happens. So my opponent, he had to double mulligan, I single mulligan, which was the other reason why I stopped mulliganing actually and didn't go for something more disruptive, because I was able to, oops, sorry, I'm going to pause that, because I was able to, because I had the first turn Inquisition against somebody who double mulliganed. When he went first turn Elves, I thought, oh boy, I hope he does have a target, and he did. Luckily, reality shifts, so he's down to just Breeding Pool Elves, Fact or fiction, still a Hellkite. So looking at this, the fact that he has no lands in hand, I'm thinking it's going to be ages before I even have to worry about the fact or fiction. So I would assume I have this game in the bag, barring like a top-decked Sylvan Library or something. But it isn't top-deck Sylvan. He does, however, top-deck a land. So, okay. Excuse me. He got his land, but I can set him back by killing his Elves of Deep Shadow right now. That Mox was a okay draw here as well because it lets me throw away the City of Brass and and basically have a card that produces any mana. It doesn't deal damage to me. Later, I'm going to regret throwing that city away quite a bit, though, as you'll see. So I'll go ahead and abrade that Elves of Deep Shadow away. I should have thrown away the Sulphur Springs. Or Blood Crypt, perhaps. But we've killed the Elves of Deep Shadow. He's only got 2 cards in hand, 2 lands in play. Yeah, I should have thrown away the Sulphur Springs, not the City of Brass. Because if I draw Cryptic Command, I can't cast it right now. So thinking about that, looking at that, that was a mistake. Opponent, no cards in hand. Well, no useful ones. Draws his second land in a row. Well, that's unfortunate, but I do have Muddle the Mixture. Now, I've also got Baleful Strix. Now, here's the problem. Because I threw away City of Brass, if this were City of Brass, then I could go ahead and cast Baleful Strix. And with the Muddle the Mixture I drew, I had protection against Fact or Fiction in the event that he were to draw a third land in a row, which he does. So I'm like, well, that is a bummer, but I'll wait on Baleful Strix. I'm not under pressure. My opponent, of course, realizes that I would have played my 4-mana commander here if I didn't have a counter, and he needs that Fact or Fiction resolve, so he's not going to run his fact into my counter. He's going to wait for me to tap out. And I draw Terminate. I still can't play Strix, but Terminate does give me a long-term solution to steal Hellkite. Strix is a solution too, but it's a risky one because he might remove it, and if he were to do that, I could terminate the Hellkite in response. Alternately, I could treat Strix as the answer to Hellkite and then Terminate as the answer to Damia. So this feels pretty good right now. Opponent top decks yet another land. So that is nothing but lands every single turn so far. That's actually quite frustrating for me. Being as how I'm supposedly the land destruction deck. I got him down to 1 land, and he's drawn, what is it, 4 in a row? Pretty gnarly. So I drew a Spell Snare. I can't really do anything with that. I know he still has exactly Fact or Fiction and Steal Hellkite. So I'll pass. My opponent, of course, draws a land of a different color. And then, thankfully, finally, I thought he was going to go for Fact or Fiction. Instead, he goes for Steal Hellkite. Well, not what I wanted to see because it puts me in a bind. So, do I terminate it here, or do I Baleful Strix on the next turn? And if I don't find a blue in my top 2 cards, I can't cast Muddle on Fact or Fiction. And Fact or Fiction's a problem that will kill me for sure, especially given that my opponent has this tremendous mana advantage, thanks to having drawn nothing but lands for 5 turns in a row. So I decide that I think, going to go ahead and risk that he doesn't draw, excuse me, a 6 land and have it be black and play Damia next turn. But if he does, I'm definitely in trouble. Well, I drew Chrome Mox for the turn, so that does let me play the Strix here because I can imprint Spell Snare if I don't find a blue source. I do not. So I don't want to imprint Spell Snare. I would much rather do the Bolt, but gonna have to because I didn't find a blue, and I wanted to dig with Strix, and I was really hoping to find a 2-mana counter or LD or something that I could use to deal with Damia, because now I've got 2 different threats, Damia and Fact, and it depends a lot on just how lucky my opponent actually is, but it's a pretty gnarly situation to be in. So he draws and casts Fact or Fiction. Thank goodness. Okay, now as long as he doesn't counter this, then I'm okay. Like, he has exactly 1 card in his hand. Did he draw a counter spell? Okay, he did not. So I'm thinking he either drew a card that costs 3 mana or more, or he drew a black card. Most likely a black card, right? So I drew a Kolaghan's Command, and so because I have the command and he only has 1 card in hand, I'm going to go ahead and Kess. So here's the deal. I'm holding the command in the bolt as my answer for Damia if it comes down. Terminate, excuse me, is my actual answer, but there's always a chance that my opponent finds a way to kill Kess, for example, and then slams Damia. So I'm holding the K command even though I want to take the last card out of his hand. But what I'm really hoping is that the card in his hand was stuck because it was black or 3 mana. Because in that case, Inquisition might be able to take it. So I'm going to go for Inquisition here since I'm not going to spend the mana any other way. And I lock out, and it was a black card. So I take out the animate, reanimate. The other possibility being that it could have been a 2 blue, like a counter spell, and my opponent just got, impatient. But that worked out nicely. And that was definitely a bit of luck there. Finally hitting me. Like I thought I had all the luck in the beginning, and then my opponent just hit, runner, like totally insanity, right? So if he draws a swamp here, I'm going to be flabbergasted. He does not, but he draws a way to go get it. I'm less flabbergasted by that. There's lots of ways to go get black mana and green. It just would have been insane for him to have drawn the perfect card back to back every single time. Although I guess he had one turn that hurt him, that reanimate turn, and that might be enough. So I top deck Knight's Whisper, which is perfect right here with Kess, because I need to reload. And what I'd really like to do more than anything is find LD to get this black mana off the table, because I want to keep my opponent off of his third color to reduce the threat of Damia or any other shenanigans that he might be pulling. So I'm going to go ahead and Whisper, and then Whisper before playing a land despite having drawn one. First of all, if I draw a Sinkhole, I want to be able to play Flooded Strand and cast it. Secondly, if I draw Wasteland, I want to be able to play it and use it. So you always want to be, thinking about proper sequencing on your turn. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I see even the streamers make, that I watch them missequence their turns, and it fills me with pain. So anyway, I did not draw either of those cards. However, I did draw the Tainted Pact that I talked about, which is exactly why I wanted to run this game. My opponent sent me a message about how he was really appreciating the interactions in this deck, and I thought that was pretty cool, because usually people do not say nice things. Anyway, so he gets a Bird of Paradise and decides to play that over Damia, which is pretty interesting. I'm not entirely clear why. I think Damia's 7, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. I mean, if I'm him, what good is a bird going to do? I guess. So this is what I can only surmise, that I have the Terminate in the graveyard, and he wants to see if he can bait me into burning the Terminate on the bird. Of course, I'm not going to do that. But I guess it's the bird is a wing, and me using the Terminate is a prayer. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and instead Tainted Pact. So it's, unfortunately, I don't know how to show you what it's exiling, but it just said, do you wish to put Shivan Reef in your hand? Of course not. Badlands, no. Dark Confidant, too slow, sorry. Do I wish to put Mars Flats? Nope. Fire Covenant, to kill a Bird of Paradise? No. Rancid Earth, yes. Yes, I do. That will get me exactly what I want. Look at that. It got me through, what was that, 4? At the end of my opponent's turn, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I dug 6 cards deep for exactly what I wanted, which was LD. And probably one of the best LD spells I could get. And look what was underneath. Holy smokes, the 7th card's a Wasteland. So if I do this correctly, I can get maximum damage and smoke 4 of my opponent's mana sources in a single turn. So this is what I decided to do. I should have attacked first. My opponent's not going to block. But I Rancid Earth the island. Then I attack. Opponent takes the damage. I just thought that if I Rancid Earthed with exactly 6 cards in graveyard, so I didn't trigger the threshold, that with 1 less blue source, my opponent would be more likely to not block. And so I played it out that way. But there's an argument could be made either way. It's just 3 points of damage, but you always want to try to play tight. So now that it's after combat, I do want Threshold to kick in. So I'm going to go ahead and burn this Wasteland off and take out his black. And now I'm going to flashback Rancid Earth. I have 8 cards in the graveyard, which means Threshold triggers, kills the bird and my Baleful Strix, and I've just killed Island, Overgrown Tomb, Breeding Pool, and a Birds of Paradise, all with the power of that single Tainted Pact. Totally amazing, and a nice top deck right following it up. My opponent, Landmaster, that he is, draws a Dryad Arbor, but he is getting quickly into that realm of mathematical impossibility here, if we haven't already arrived. The fact that I get to Pact again is just crazy. And look at this. Do you wish to put Molten Rain in your hand? Why, yes, I do. Molten Rain sounds just spiffy. Thank you very much. So we'll go ahead and take that. And I decide, so I'm going to swing in for damage, of course. I'm going to go ahead and end the turn. So you would think, like, okay, well, what do I do here? Molten Rain, and then maybe flashback a Braid and kill the Dryad Arbor. But I don't think that takes advantage of my hand as best as it could be. I'm really sorry about the coughing. It's getting bad. All right, so instead what I do is I always leave a stop on my opponent's draw phase, not mine. And it's for this exact kind of play. I don't want to have to fiddle around with adding and taking off stops. I just want things to always be the same. So during my opponent's draw step, I'm going to K-command him. There's only a tiny handful of like 4 or 5 cards that he could be playing here as an instant response. Beast Within being probably his best option. Or maybe Harrow. Well, actually, Harrow would probably be his best option. But anyway, K-command here, make him discard and kill the Dryad Arbor. So take away it's basically time walk him and kill a permanent. Amazing. All right, so I get to draw a card, Molten Rain him, and send over some fiery lava to rain on his forest for a second time. And I'm feeling like with this graveyard, I mean, what is he going to do? Well, apparently he's going to top deck a Tormod's Crypt and say, beat me with the rest of your hand, not your graveyard. I'm tired of that. So that's what we're going to have to do. So first thing is I'm going to go ahead and Cryptic Command Forest back to his hand. I find nothing useful whatsoever. So I will go ahead and K-command or Cryptic Command the excuse me, the other forest back to his hand. I still find nothing useful. So I'll go ahead and send in, but that set him back so far that I mean, as you know, the game was already over, but he could have potentially drawn and played Lignify, and this set him back by 1 turn, and 1 turn's all I need to close the game out. So I thought that this made a good deal of sense. Rather than counterspelling the Lignify, I might as well set him back this way. And if I were to top deck a LD spell here or a discard spell, it would have just felt nicer, I guess. But yeah, so I go ahead and bolt him. He's at 6. Throw a Jace down, bolt from the grave, and that's it. So you got to see all the new cards in action, or most of them, either in action or available. You know, Terminate, Dreadbore was there. We saw Tainted Pact. So that's 3. What else did we get to see in this game that is new? Baleful Strix came into play. So quite a few of the new cards actually made their appearance in this game. So I thought it was a pretty cool game to showcase the changes. I suppose I can spin through this last one. I don't remember how this went whatsoever. Just have 2 games for you, and then after that I'm going to go ahead and call it because this cough is driving me mad. All right. So here I'm... Oh, yeah. Playing against Arkham Dagson. And I believe I won the die roll, and I've got this nutty hand here. I think I won the die roll. No, I guess I didn't. My opponent did have to mulligan, though. So he leads off with Island Welding Jar, and that's a little baffling to me. Definitely want to know what's going on over there, so hopefully I don't get stifled here. I hate that feeling. I do not, so let's take a look. And seize on some of his thoughts. I could thought seize his thought cast. That would be a true thought seizing. He has a Hedron Archive there, which I'd very much like to steal with Dak Faden, and of course the Worm Coil is quite a reasonable choice as well. So looking back on it, I think maybe taking Thoughtcast would make the most sense here. But I went in and played it ultra safe, and I took the Hedron Archive. So my opponent goes and plays the other card that I knew about, and so that does explain, I guess, why he let off with Welding Jar. And yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and play the Rakdos Signet here. Everything coast looks like it's clear. This is just going to be a little bit of a beat up session. But my opponent draws Grim Monolith. I don't know if he drew it last turn, and if he did, I guess I should have played the Inquisition. But since I knew the other two cards in his hand, I figured I'd wait for a little while and give him time to actually get a target. So that may have been wrong. This forces my hand. I've got to either pillage or dack it. I don't think I can afford to let... The problem is, I assume my opponent wants to go land Grim Monolith out of Wormcoil, but if he goes Grim Monolith into Arkham Dagson, and gives it haste, so he could have an artifact creature like Memnite, or there's quite a few others, and that could all basically end up working out very poorly. So let's say I were to go land Reign of Tears here, which is what I wanted to do. Yeah, so then all he has to do is just go, he's got one unknown, so he draws, so he'd have two unknowns. He goes Island, Arkham Dagson has haste, and plays Memnite, and then slams something into play that's like completely flips the game. So too risky. I'm just gonna go ahead and get Dak Faden down. Play it ultra safe. I kind of didn't want to play Dak Faden here too, only because I know what it feels like to be on the other side of a Dak Faden when you're the artifact deck. It feels like this. It feels like it's time to scoop, and it usually is. So, either way, that game was just a little bit silly. You could see that we were about to do some just gross-tacular, spectacularly gross things here. We're going to have a lot of fun with that, but like if my opponent, had no play after I steal his Grim, he's going to tap the Grim in response if he knows what he's doing, and then I assume he does, and then I'm going to, on the next turn, I get to play land, Inquisition my opponent, and then pillage away an island and start the Reign of Tears. Actually, yeah, game's over. All right, so again, here's the deck list. I hope that you had fun watching it. Thank you very much for taking the time to check it out, and I'll see you next time.